Welcome to episode 16 of the Black and White Bistro Show, where black and white photographers come to grow, share, and get inspired. Thank you for joining us. We're glad you're here. As you can see, we're in the happy Halloween spirit. Our goal is simple: to provide a quality space where artists who enjoy black and white photography can come to meet other black and white artists and perhaps gain some insights and some tips from our guests. I'm the creator and host of the Black and White Bistro Show, DavidLPayne, and we are proud to introduce you to a very special black and white photographer who makes his home in Southern California in the U.S. Now, gifted black and white artist and photographer, Steve Murdock.
Oh, thank you. Strong. I think I asked for a latte. Thank you. I think he's new. Wow. You know, seeing the bistro online, it's just not the same as actually being here. It's so cozy. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm feeling a little saturated. Can we drop the saturation in the room just a little bit? Thank you. And can you pull the red channel just slightly towards the green and drop the luminance just a hair? So much better. Hi, I'm Steve Murdock. I started doing anything that you could call photography really about 2 years ago. I couldn't tell you why I'm a photographer at this point in my life, but I do have a firm belief that the universe puts you where it wants you and it gives you the tools that it thinks that you need. Now, the real problem is David asked me to pick 3 images to talk about. 3. I don't know. I've got so many of them. It could be anything. It could be, street photography. Yeah, maybe that. Oh, landscapes. Oh, seascapes. What else? Portraiture. Oh, I love doing portraiture. Look at this. Still lives. Oh, yeah, those are good too. There's too much to choose from. Yes, I know I'm cheating. I don't know. How am I supposed to pick just okay, I need some clarity. Okay, clarity of purpose. There it is. Okay. Oh, thank you. Anyway, it is my sincere wish that you don't discover me for the fraud that I am, and let's get started.
Many thanks, my friend. Over the next few minutes, we'll discover 3 of Steve's personal favorite images and the story behind each, and we'll share with you our live Zoom interview with Steve, in which he shared his views and experiences in black and white photography. Now let's enjoy Steve's first artist's favorite image as he shares the story behind it in his own words.
Lunch break. Shot with an 85mm prime at f8 at 1/800th of a second, ISO 100. Shot on my Canon T7 on February 1st, 2024. This is a crime of opportunity. I took this shot outside the fountain at the Reuben Fleet Science Museum in Balboa Park in San Diego. I always have a weird attraction to shooting active fountains whenever I come across them, but I rarely find the results satisfying when I get the shot up on the computer. I love this shot in particular because everything about it is not what you're supposed to do. First of all, it's high noon, as you can see by the top-down illumination of the high sun, and I was doing street shots with an 85mm portrait lens on a crop sensor camera just for the hell of it. I shot through it, about 10 exposures, and much to my surprise, The illumination of the water was complemented by the darker stream coming from the fountain itself. The shots framed by the tree I was standing underneath and the building in the background. The 6 people just sitting on the edge are, interestingly, evenly spaced. And though they are in silhouette, they retain just enough detail to convey little bursts of character like crows on a phone line. Ultimately, I feel this image conveys great contrast and energy mixed with just the right amount of stillness and a reflective mood while chaos explodes all around.
And now, here's our live Zoom interview with Steve as he shares his answers to our questions and provides some personal insights into his black and white photography journey. Welcome to the Black and White Bistro Show. Today, we've got a very special black and white artist with us, Steve Murdock, coming to us from San Diego.
Hey!
Thanks so much for taking the time to be on the show today. It's going to be a good
Pleasure
one.
to be here, David. Pleasure to be here.
Let's get right into the questions. A question I get from a number of folks on Vero is, do you shoot your photos in black and white, or do you shoot them in color and desaturate?
Yeah. My technique, I shoot everything in color. My philosophy on that is that the image tells me if it needs to be in black and white or if it needs to be in color. That's just how I operate. And of course, desaturation is a bit of a misnomer. At that point, it starts dipping over into the artistic rather than merely just the interpretive. So, if you were to take a color image and just desaturate it, then you just get a desaturated image. So it tends to lack nuance. When I go black and white, it's color fields, it's contrasts, as something that drives the grayscale, within, as you say, the first and the the first and the 10th, then the 9 shades, or the first and the 11th and the 9 shades in between. So when I started playing with it, and I'm sure this is common, is that it was, and this is terrible to say, but it was always a great save if you missed focus or if you had some unacceptable blur. Things in a black and white context are amazingly forgiving it compared to a color one, because you're just not, once you take saturation and hue out of the equation, you're in a whole new universe. So that was how I got started with it. And then, of course, once you realize, oh, well, that's a little opportunistic, and there's definitely things that cry out to be black and white. So for me, it's a case by case basis.
Interesting. In my own shooting, one of the things that I feel, for lack of a better word, is seeing in black and white is something, at least for me, that it seems to come very naturally. When I'm out walking, opportunistic shooting like I was last week at the Tokyo International Forum. Tremendous
Beautiful work,
architecture.
by the way.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. But my eye gravitates towards shapes, light and shadow, tones. So as I'm looking and I see things, I'm making mental notes.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because some of the folks we've had on the show talk about, changing your EVF and your LCD screen on your camera to monochrome view so it's represented in black and white. Others say, no, I want to see the color. And then it helps them to think about what are the components of this image that are going to really make a strong black and white shot. It sounds like you're in the latter camp.
Yeah, I've certainly played with setting up the viewfinder in monochrome so that I can, just evaluate things for shape. But again, for my purposes and my techniques, I would end up, if I did not avail myself of the color, because I think at the end of the day, that's a function of translation. Especially the more time you spend with it, the more you realize, okay, this thing in the red field is going to go into this particular quality of gray. As opposed to the thing in the green field and, some of the blues. So eventually you can develop a sense of how that translates into monochrome ahead of time, if that's the direction that you're going to go. And if I didn't have that available as a building block for the final image, then I would end up having to use different techniques, which are ultimately about as effective, but not nearly as convenient. Targeted contrast, adding color tones, in order to accomplish the same effect after the fact, which is not ideal for me, just because it gets you further away from the true image. So yeah, I basically, for me, stripping that away, and I have enormous admiration for people like yourself who do that, go out with that Leica and just blast it out there, and you come up with great things. For me and my workflow, it would be like going out without half my toolbox, and I don't need, and I might need that
Good
tool
point.
later.
Yeah, good point. It leads me to our second question.
Yeah.
Are there 2 or 3 black and white photographers that have inspired you the most? And if so, who were they and what was it about their work that grabbed your attention?
Yeah, it's funny when you think about that. It's a lot like I said at the beginning of the segment. There's so many to choose from. Just armies of excellent black and white photographers, yourself included, who just do amazing work. So to try and pare it down to the ones that are most impactful, I think in my personal context, the 2 that just consistently hit me right in the gut every time would be Robert Schmidt. Our own Robert Schmidt here on Vero, who is excellent, and Arthur Fabrizi.
Yeah.
Amazing. Everything that comes out of that guy's camera, and he's mostly shooting street. But each one is just, it's a huge story. And then, and then you go on and, people that shoot sharp architecture. Carolyn Montgomery was on here for a while and she did amazing work. I haven't seen her for a while, but Wilson Tan is another great black and white photographer. So it's, as with most things, Vero, there's this embarrassment of riches of talent, many of whom, have certainly driven me to just bald-faced imitation. So
I know that. I know that feeling very well. Yeah, you mentioned Robert Schmidt. His black and white portraiture, street portraiture, is just, to me, it's the definition of storytelling.
Yes.
The one shot of his that haunts me, literally haunts me, is the guy who was a drug addict and was trying to recover, and there's 100 stories written in that face, the way Robert captured it. And that's not a one-off. I mean, he's got so many. There's another person on Vero that I've really come to like a lot, and that's Tonsby.
Tonsby. I was just about to say, while we're in South Africa with Robert.
Yeah.
Tonsby. Oh, everything that comes out of that guy's camera, just across the spectrum. And, again, the thing that they both have in common is that they could niche in anything, but they don't have to. It's like everything,
Yeah.
everything they do across the spectrum is always amazing. But yeah,
Huge
Tonspeed's work,
flexibility.
and Tonspeed just, his studio work is amazing. His street work is amazing. Just everything. And he just produces it in vast quantities. And you just, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. I'm always grateful for their work.
Yeah. It's, how you look at so many of the works and the great photographers that are on Vero.
Yeah.
Robert, I can look at his image without ever having to see the header on it. And I know who shot it.
You know exactly who it was.
Tonspeed, the same way.
Same thing.
Juan Carlos Pascual Lopez for architecture. Now, he was our first guest artist on the show, but he inspired me so much because I love the challenge of shooting architecture in an interpretive way, which is what black and white shooting is. Yeah. And he has such an eye for it, and he captures the entirety of the scene, yet has it incredibly focused on his shapes and his tonality. Juan Carlos's work is really inspirational for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's not even approaching the Germans, all the German photographers, and I start getting dizzy when I start thinking about just everybody who's producing out there, fellow Americans, they're just all over the planet. There's all this amazing work being done.
Yeah, I love the work. Since you were talking about the American shooters, Mike Shafton, his images of the Southwest.
Yes.
To me, they're timeless. He just did one of an abandoned schoolhouse in the middle of this prairie with a swing set in the front. Again, it just, wow. It gets in the data bank and stays there. Now, let's enjoy Steve's second artist favorite image and learn the story behind that.
Miles Noir. Shot with an EF 100mm macro lens at f4 at 1/200th of a second, ISO 3200, shot on my Canon R6 Mark II, taken May 11th, 2024. I would be remiss if I didn't include a shot of my wildly popular cat, Miles. Here he sits in his usual majestic fashion at the foot of the bed in our loft space in San Diego, wearing that "what are you doing now" expression on his face. Miles is a beautiful example that while one can always make a subject interesting, a beautiful subject is its own reward. He never needs retouching. I'm not a gearhead by nature, but as I began to get professional work over the last year or so, I found it prudent to upgrade my camera and invest in some quality glass. I firmly believe that great work can be accomplished with modest equipment. That said, I cannot adequately express the joy of the quantum jump in quality that you can achieve by effective use of quality gear. This shot is a great example of how a casual image shot in pretty low light, but with a modern camera's ability to get good focus and effectively handle higher ISOs without crippling noise, coupled with the clarity and detail from a decent lens, yields not only more usable photographs, but significantly reduces the amount of post-production work required to get the results you want.
We're back with Steve Murdock. Steve, I'd like to get your views. You and I had in our first call together, we had a great conversation about this topic, and I'd like to get your views on it again.
Yep.
The relative importance of camera versus lens versus actually seeing the scene for black and white photography. Can you talk a little bit about those three and, in your mind, rate them from most to least important?
Yeah. For my own arc in this whole thing, My wife, my lovely wife, Jen, who has been my enabler, for this whole thing, she has provided me with ever increasing levels of technology. So she started me out with the bridge camera, which only shot JPEG. Lovely lens, but definitely a program camera. And before that, now that I think about it, my real gateway drug, and this is an odd anecdote, but I used to have an office job about 3/4 of a mile from my home. And I used to walk up and down the C Street corridor, and anybody who knows my work knows that I do a certain amount of street work, and there's a astonishing amount of human suffering out there. And in order to avoid contaminating the moment, which is a different skill set when you're dealing with a full size camera, but when you're walking around with a smartphone and you're shooting from the hip, and the technique is kind of you kind of stand there and act like you forgot where you were going, and you fire up a few shots and you shoot it in RAW, and then you come back and do sharpening and try and augment it. You're dealing with a very small sensor. So some of my proving ground, or the hardest training that I had to do, was to try and extract effective results from what is a less than ideal tool for that kind of work. But the candidates were good. And then I moved over to this Sony bridge camera, which had its own had a dedicated zoom lens on it. But a step up because of the size of the sensor and the capabilities that it had in terms of, you actually had a camera that, had independent control of ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. So I started learning those, and then my lovely enabler got me a Rebel T7i, which shoots RAW, and you can change lenses. So that was another level. And, you're dealing with prime versus zoom. And so if you launch in with something too powerful, I suspect it's a disincentive to learn the fundamental skills, which I was kind of driven into by the increments by which I secured gear. So the camera I'm using now, which I'm speaking to you on now, my R6 Mark II. I mean, it's a pro level camera, full sensor. I have good glass now, but I think we discussed this earlier, but the primary joy of the thing is that what used to take me 4 times as long to do in post, with a more powerful tool, I can do comparatively quickly. So my productivity is increased. But if you walk in with too much firepower, I think it hurts you in the long run, because you don't learn the core skills. Because again, any contemporary camera is way more powerful than what the greatest photographers in the 20th century were shooting with, for the most part. So we've got plenty of power under the hood. It's just a question of, ascertain your subject, figure out what angle you're shooting them at, all the actual photographer things, and don't over rely on technology. But boy, am I grateful for autofocus systems that don't ever miss the eye. It's just for portrait work. I had a dime for every time I had the near perfect shot working with less powerful camera, but I just missed the focus on that eye just enough that I can't use that. But modern autofocus systems are wonderful in that regard. And again, huge megapixels, the ability to crop down, without losing horrible detail. Those are wonderful for, things like still life architecture, macro, all that good stuff. So I'm grateful to have more power in the arsenal, but I'm also grateful that I, went the long way to actually figure out how to do it before, we got the heavy hitting back.
Yeah, it's
yeah.
No, I think great points, because there's some great smartphone photographers out there. I mean, you see their work every day.
Mhm.
For me, I really enjoy and admire what they can create with that. But I have part of it's the Leica experience, but
Yeah.
it's true with any camera because I did this with my older Fujifilm cameras. Learning the triangle,
Yeah.
learning how to select aperture, the effects of shutter speed on a scene. I want to tell a
Yeah.
story. If I want movement, I'm going to take the shutter speed much slower so I get that blur as somebody goes through it. Or
Yeah.
if I'm shooting macro and I've got a giant bee that will not settle down, thank God for 1/1000th of a second.
Yeah.
And then on top of all of that, then comes the ISO. And
Mhm.
ISO can give an interpretive feel to a shot. And
Mhm.
if you understand how those three work,
Yeah.
you can really create something special.
Well,
To
and
me though, if you can't, what I'll quote, see the scene,
yeah.
the best sensor, the most expensive camera on the planet, it's not going to take the shot for you. And it's
Mhm.
like Ansel Adams said, the most important part of any camera is the 6 inches behind it,
Yeah.
aka the human brain. For me, the enjoyment of creating photographs versus taking a snapshot.
Yeah.
Both are important, both have their place. But for me, it's that making of a moment, making of an image, which kind
Yeah.
of, it's a perfect segue into our next question.